You're listening to Data Science Leaders, the premier podcast for executives tackling the world's most important challenges using the power of machine learning. Let's dive in. Welcome. Today with us, we have two very special guests from the Digital Data and Design Institute at Harvard. We have Jen Stave, Executive Director for the Institute, and we have Catherine Feldman, Senior Research Strategist at the Institute. I would love to start off with some research that you've been doing into why it is that data science and machine learning projects fail. And this is one of those things which is near and dear to my heart because when I used to be an industry analyst at Forrester, so many of my conversations with data scientists and data science leaders felt like therapy sessions. It was all of the different struggles that they were facing to drive the impact that they knew they could do and they knew the opportunity was, but that was so challenging in practice.
This is a great question. We have two founding principles at Digital Data Design Institute on this particularly. The first is that the pace of change is increasing at an exponential rate. And so technologies are advancing and becoming increasingly more complicated. And generative AI is a great modern use case of this, where we see OpenAI launching ChatGPT in November, and by January has 100 million users, fastest growing app in history. I think it took Facebook 4 years and Google 1 year to reach the same network. The second principle is that the AI technology itself is not always enough. You have to account for the technology in your business model. You have to account for it in your operating model. And firms that try to plug and play AI or ML or build it or just create an AI factory, they ultimately won't see the dividends from that investment because they haven't adjusted how they're operating. There is a wonderful book, Competing in the Age of AI, written by Marco Iancidi, one of the principal investigators in our institute, and Karim Lakhani, the founding chair of the institute. And they provide a number of examples where businesses fail to adjust their operating model and business model. One of the most resonant examples for me is Kodak, where Kodak actually had all of the right technology. They had the most advanced digital technology, but they didn't anticipate disruption by a player like Facebook that had the same technology, but had an entirely different business model wrapped around it. They didn't even see Facebook as a competitor. And now when you take these two founding principles together, what does it mean? It means that incumbents are in for a hard ride. Things are changing quickly. Things are changing in a much more complicated way. And at the same time, in order to harness those technologies, you have to do the really hard work of changing your business. Sometimes easier to plug in AI. It's harder to change your business. So incumbents, I think, have a really rough road ahead, and they'll have to figure out how to continually innovate.
Well, I hear a lot of Clay Christensen's work on disruption in the things that you're mentioning, and obviously everybody was talking about disruption in the early 2000s and even in the 2010s, but you don't hear about it as much today. But it sounds like really those same concepts around the acceleration of a technology far, far beyond the capabilities of folks that have to adopt it, the competing on different dimensions of strategy. It sounds like they're just as relevant today in the age of AI as they were when Clay Christensen first did that research on disk drives. Is that true?
Yes, I think Clay Christensen's work is alive and well. And what we're seeing is that the ability of a firm to innovate is not just important, but more important than previously, where you have so much disruption from digitally native startups that don't have all of the baggage of these incumbents, and then they're able to put experimentation and innovation into the DNA of the company, enabling it to rapidly innovate. If you think about incumbents, they weren't built with a plan to change. They were built with a plan to exploit what they did really well. And so now we see startups that understand that they're going to have to be a different business in 5 years, and they can build that into the very DNA of their company.
Now, obviously for incumbents, it's often very easy to know that they need to change, that they need to build in those sort of dynamic capabilities to go in and embrace change and change how they operate, but much, much easier said than done. I guess, are there any silver bullets? Probably not. But are there any at least starting points for how organizations?
You'll have to pay me a very high price for a silver bullet. No, it's a great question. And so at Digital Data Design Institute, we partner with companies around the world. And many of them are large incumbents asking us this very question. How do we become competitive? How do we adjust? How do we innovate? And I can give a few examples of where we've seen some success. We partnered last year with a large CPG company, and they have been around very long time. So the definition of, you're a classic incumbent, but they came to us with an understanding that it was a multifunctional problem. It wasn't, hey, how do I build an AI factory? It was, how do I change everything from my R&D function to my pricing in order to innovate? And when they take that multifunctional approach, it sets the seeds for a more systemic and enduring change to the company. Another example that I think it highlights this point is a platform company out of Asia that we have partnered with. And what we saw with this company, this gets back to the point I made earlier, is that they had experimentation just in their core DNA. Everything they do, they experiment with, from not just research and development, but in their business model. And so when we started partnering with them to say, how can we drive innovation further? How can we develop new incentive models, for example? They were able to rapidly innovate and implement because it had become such a common process for them. And so I would say those are two, not silver bullets, but perhaps necessary components in order to start to move these large ships, right, that take a pretty comprehensive effort in order to move.
One addition that I would add in here is that while there's the agility and the velocity that is offered to digitally native startups, some benefit that the incumbents would have is a breadth of understanding and a depth of data. And that's a true benefit that when they can lean into that and have the infrastructure in place to develop this understanding of that it's not just a technology problem, but a people problem, understanding your customers, understanding your workforce, and being able to have these data points in place and a data-driven strategy around where is it that we're trying to go and what tools will help us get there. This is an advantage that some of the incumbents would have over these new encroaching startups of understanding what is the landscape today and being able to actually see that transition over time. I want to think of a different way to say that.
Yeah, so I mean, it definitely sounds like there are these competitive advantages that incumbent firms can leverage, and they shouldn't discount this.
So where we've seen the most success for some of these incumbents is where they're able to lean into their scale and that they're able to have this breadth of knowledge across their different products, across their different employees, and being able to understand in enacting this plan of change, how do you think long term? You can see a snapshot of the world as it is today, and being able to get that lens is incredibly valuable. You can implement these solutions in the short term, but how do you ensure that that is durable and can actually scale over time? We've heard so many stories where companies will try to embark upon this journey and be successful at developing an AI strategy, but it would be a one-off experiment that is then abandoned, or it is a task force that is spun up for this purpose. And after they see some initial success, it's a check mark on the portfolio and then move on. This is not where the disruption will happen.
No, it feels like this is, as you mentioned, Kodak, but also Polaroid had the same issue. And you could even look back at IBM and the PC division and how it was one of pioneering work there. They actually did implement a product. The product was successful, but then wasn't sustainable on an ongoing basis because the organization reverted back to its old traditional processes and ways.
Yes, a culture of digital first and experimentation is absolutely critical. And ensuring that that is the lifeblood of an organization is what we have seen as a commonality across the companies that have been digital leaders in this transformation.
Well, you mentioned leaders. Taking that literally, leadership seems to be at the very core of this. To have senior leaders who can ensure that that prioritization and that sustained effort to make sure that this isn't just a one-off and becomes ingrained in the culture of the organization. Could you speak to how leaders can become not just traditional leaders in their own industries, but leaders that can drive that transformation in their organization?
Yeah, I'll take this one. That leaders are important. That goes without saying. What I've seen in working with these companies around the world is that it has to be a top-down directive that we are going to transform. Some of the difficult aspects of doing this from a bottoms-up approach is that there's no real paradigm available to create an ROI on AI. What's the ROI on a data lake? The financial and accounting structures just simply don't exist to enable different divisions to create a business case for localized innovation. And so when you have the leaders at a company understand that you will get significant financial gain by going this approach, even if the ROI is not in the same ballpark of other initiatives that you do, even if it's ambiguous, that direction and that leadership will help all of the divisions mobilize around a shared strategy. To our point earlier that if it's localized and if it's a proof of concept and you don't account for how to scale it, then it will ultimately fail. And so to really mobilize the entire company around this shared vision of, yes, we're going to do this transformation. Yes, it's going to affect everyone. And yes, we are going to see financial gain from doing it.
I'm going to make a controversial statement here, which is when the question comes up around prioritization, a common pitfall is trying to do away with if everything is important, then nothing is important. And that should hold true, except for in this case, everything really is important. It needs to be a holistic approach. As Jen was saying, there needs to be a critical look at what is the organizational infrastructure? What is your experimentation pipeline? Do you have the data infrastructure in place? And do you have a workforce that is equipped to adopt it effectively? And it becomes a question of not just prioritization, but sequencing. And what is the staging for your particular firm based on the biggest areas of opportunity that would unlock the greatest potential and durability over time?
Now, obviously, it helps if you have a leader who's been through this before and has already seen success and has that view of all of the different things that need to change or that need to fall into place in order to drive that impact. Are you seeing a change when it comes to the leaders that are being promoted in organizations, that they're increasingly looking to individuals who have been involved in data science projects or AI or machine learning projects previously in a more active way? So not necessarily that they were data scientists themselves, but that they're looking for more leaders who have been more hands-on, more involved, versus it's still this realm of we're expecting to be executive sponsors who will go in and advocate for this, but we're not going to be very involved in the day-to-day.
There's great research out of Harvard Business School on this topic. Sadal Neely has a wonderful book, The Digital Mindset. And that, I think, demonstrates how leaders need to have a baseline understanding, say, 20, 30% of these concepts in order to be an effective data science leader. You don't need to have a PhD. You don't need to be a data scientist, but you need to understand some of these core pieces of it in order to lead. So I don't think you need to be a data science professional in order to lead data science transformation. You just have to have the relevant knowledge, baseline knowledge.
Well, I've always been struck at by how little there is out there in terms of education for leaders who want to do more with AI and machine learning. There's plenty of new coursework, et cetera, out there that's available for a data scientist to understand the methods. But in terms of once you go beyond that into how do you run a project, how do you manage a team, how do you staff a team, how do you work across all these different stakeholders, how do you measure, set those goals and measure those outcomes against those goals, it becomes all of a sudden much harder. And again, in my former life, I would get requests from folks who were CFOs, who were heads of product, who had never done anything with data science before, had inherited a data science team, and were like, where do I go to know how I lead with this?
So we are building out our community at the Digital Data and Design Institute. We want to ensure that there is not this ivory tower notion of all of this fantastic cutting edge research that's happening at Harvard is staying within Harvard. We want to empower the leaders of tomorrow and ensure that the insights that come out of our strategic research partnerships are disseminated more broadly and being able to be utilized and adopted at large.
So obviously everybody is extremely excited about generative AI. And so even though some of the technology components have been in place for a while, it feels like it has really captured the attention of pretty much everybody, from leadership down to, if my grandmother were alive, I would say my own grandmother. I'm curious what work that you guys are doing in terms of helping organizations understand really how they can make headway with this technology that for a lot of organizations is very new and very different and is going to require very different business models.
Yes, we also, like the rest of the world, talk about generative AI every second of the day. And we have really dedicated a large portion of the Institute to figuring this out. Unlike some of these other concepts that have been in business for quite some time, this is new. And how you implement it is new, and how businesses should grapple with it are also new. And so we have started at the first step, gathering data. And we've started generative AI working groups open to the public to hear from people across sectors, across different functions of companies, how they're thinking about it. And it's a massive data gathering exercise, essentially to get the landscape nailed down of what it looks like today, so that we then can drive the agenda forward to understand here's what we need to do to use generative AI in a safe and comprehensive way. Here's what we should look out for with some of the pitfalls. And that can be sector-specific, industry-specific, or even firm-specific advice. But really getting that balance sheet, if you will, is the very first step to doing anything in this space. And so we've been embarking on that data collection activity and pulling together that balance sheet. We also have been really focused on what companies need to know today in terms of skills, just to be able to do their own analysis. So not waiting for someone else to come and tell them what to do, but how can we help companies understand how to kick off their own initiatives in generative AI? And so we've been doing a number of boot camps and other engagements to essentially put the tools in front of people and let them experience them. But learning by doing is really important with generative AI, to see, not conceptually what is prompt engineering, but actually when you put in different queries, what happens? And we found those to be very powerful so far.
I can imagine. Curious whether you're seeing any trends in terms of who it is within organizations who's driving this experimentation and this interest in generative AI. Is it currently all over the map in terms of, yes, well, it's innovation institutes over here, it is individual data science teams over here, and it is interested executives over here? Or is it emerging that there's some patterns that a lot of organizations are standing up special units for it, or they're tasking special units that they should be going in and investigating this?
I've seen it across the board. So I have seen CEOs driving the transformation, saying, hey, we have to figure this out before it's too late. I've also seen analysts in the financial sector say, hey, this is currently banned. How do I use it on my phone to still be more effective and get around the rules? So it's every layer of the organization is currently thinking about it from their perspective.
We were talking earlier about Clay Christensen, and I've always found it very helpful to use his jobs to be done framework to get much more specific around what is it that we're actually trying to accomplish with this technology. And it's often struck me in the generative AI conversations, we seem to be very, very unclear as to what exactly that job is. What is the job that we're providing to someone? What is it that they're willing to pay for? What are the other jobs that need to happen concurrently with that for you to get that value? And it feels to me like until we have that understanding, it becomes very, very difficult to solve some of the challenges that you're describing. So how can you trust something? How can you ensure that you've got guardrails around something when you're not even really very clear as to what it is that you're trying to achieve? You have to solve and mitigate any number of potential risks and pitfalls that may or may not be relevant to your solution. Curious whether or not you guys use that framework, or whether or not you're even finding that there's certain jobs to be done when it comes to generative AI that seem to be taking off and resonating with people.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great framing of it. I've started telling people to move away from talking about prompt engineering for prompt engineering's sake, and instead start talking about what's the end, right? Prompt engineering is a means to do something. What's the end? And when you start breaking it down that way to say, what are the actual jobs that this generative AI can do, that's where we're starting to see some really powerful research. There is a working paper by one of our principal investigators, Ayelet Israeli, looking at how synthetic consumer interviews are just as good as real consumer interviews when you're talking about market research, right down to providing the same level of pricing decisions. And so think of how powerful that is. And that's just one job that generative AI can do. You can think of the others, such as coding, right? It can help with auto-correcting or suggesting coding that you haven't even written yet. It's another job to be done. And actually on that specific job, this is where I think that we'll see a lot of workforce transformation. It used to be that there were really good coders, okay coders, and bad coders. And now with generative AI, when it's applied in this specific area, the bad coders just became a little bit better. And so this is great for organizations. This means that the training and the benefit you can get from generative AI just gave you much better coders. And you know, go down the list and you look at everything that it does, and it has a little bit of a different impact. But you can't understand that impact until you put it in this jobs to be done framework. So I think it's a great way to approach it.
Excellent. Well, over and over again in the examples that you've cited, the value seems to be in this interaction between the human and the machine, that it's in the augmentation, it's in that these tools that you now have are able to give you superpowers that you didn't have before. That's very different from a lot of the worry that's in the broader media, where it's very much around the, oh my goodness, this is going to take my job. Now, obviously, if you give people superpowers, and maybe you don't need as many of them, so that we can't discount the possibility of painful transitions and transformations in the workforce. But is this one where we really should be thinking about this as an augmentation technology, or are you seeing, no, there are actual instances of where this is a substitution, that there are instances where this is going to have big impacts in terms of people potentially losing their jobs and needing to be retrained or reskilled otherwise?
I think it's too early to say that this will replace humans. I think for the time being, humans are important. And that's not to say that won't change in the future, but usually AI plus human produces a much stronger result than just a human or just AI. And maybe that will always be the case. But right now, the human in the loop is a really important part of any AI deployment.
Well, if anything, it almost sounds like, arguably, in order to be successful with AI, you sort of need to bump your human intelligence, at least when it comes to AI. And that's sort of the first step in this, is sort of educating your humans, building your human capabilities in order to be able to adopt these technologies.
Yes, and training humans how to have an AI co-pilot, right? If they're not used to leveraging it, then they won't be able to leverage it to its fullest. And so there is a culture and training piece to enabling people with AI.
So similar to when the internet first came on the scenes and we all needed to learn how to effectively use internet search engines, where there's a skill and an understanding that you eventually develop. We're going to be doing this, but this is sort of like that technology on steroids.
Exactly.
Much more powerful.
Exactly, yes.
I guess I was curious if you could speak more about this partnership concept, because there is this element where folks are recognizing their own difficulties and challenges, and they would like to tap into AI capabilities, whether that be on the people and process side or whether it be on the technology side of things. Are there good models there for how to go in and expand beyond the boundaries of your organization and really tap into that pool of knowledge that's available either through the community, but also through vendors, partners, industry associations, and the like?
Yeah, absolutely. So the benefits of academia are having these rigorous, in-depth explorations of important critical topics. And at the Digital Data and Design Institute, we have 14 labs spanning topic areas from algorithmic pricing models to the impact of climate change to how do you reskill your workforce effectively for this digital transformation, to what is the most cutting edge ethical AI technology and how do you ensure that the algorithms are trustworthy and understandable. There's this huge breadth of knowledge that we're building out, and that's all great. But if it's in a bubble, then it's not of use to anyone necessarily. So what we do at the Institute is create these strategic research partnerships where we unlock the scale of impact for this research by enabling the impact directly on companies. And one specific example that we've had is with a larger financial firm. We've had a successful partnership where we're able to take this human-centered approach to designing an intervention that would enable more positive outcomes for retirement planning. And so our labs have been integrated into some of these development processes so that the company benefits where they're able to glean from experts, how do we tackle this problem effectively? What is some of the psychological principles that we should be infusing into our product life cycle? And our researchers learn from this breadth of data that are collected and trying to offer a new, novel lens on the landscape at large. But really the benefit for the companies is being prepared and in the mindset to be able to solve the next generation of problems as well. So you have these short-term solutions and these outcomes that are being delivered together, these mutual learnings that are coming out of it. But then how can they be set up for success for some of these, as the landscape is evolving so quickly, how can they think in a more research-backed, cutting-edge, truly innovative way? And for our researchers, how can you actually deliver this impact in a world-changing global scale and be able to ensure that that is changing the business landscape and society in a more positive way?
And organizations have a huge appetite for talent, and it's already large for the data scientists, but it's nothing in comparison to the appetite for managers who have an understanding of AI and data science and machine learning. I was curious whether or not the activities that you're doing are also translating into like MBA education and other educational programs so that you're starting to train those leaders of tomorrow, but also giving partner organizations an opportunity to tap that talent when they graduate.
Yes, absolutely. While we are research first and focused on producing research, applied research with companies, we are sponsored out of Harvard Business School. And so there is a very virtuous cycle where these insights can come straight out of our labs and go right back into the classroom, where students then get access to cutting edge information of what's happening in business. We've also stood up a number of jointly sponsored opportunities, such as our Catalyst series. And these are weekend intensive programs where labs can showcase everything new that they're finding for MBA students, but we also open them to alumni, the public in some cases, and industry partners, so that there's a learning opportunity, there's a networking opportunity, and selfishly for our labs, there's often a data gathering opportunity because we can then use that forum to collect more information about ideas and innovation.
Well, Jen and Catherine, thank you very, very much for joining us. If folks want to find out more about the Institute and get in touch and engage, where should they go? d3.harvard.edu is our website, and they can find our contact information there. We encourage it. Wonderful. In addition, I would highly, highly recommend that folks tune in to Professor Karim Lakhani's keynote that he's giving here at Rev, which is on these very topics of AI and disruption. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Data Science Leaders from Domino Data Lab. If you found our discussion insightful, be sure to subscribe to never miss an episode. Your support helps us deliver cutting-edge content and keep the data science community informed and inspired. We appreciate every review. Until next time.